In the radiant city of San Diego, California, the year 2012 saw the residence of the Hawthorne family, a clan that seemed to possess everything. The Hawthornes, Richard, a prosperous real estate developer, his spouse Karen, a dedicated homemaker, and Karen's daughter from a prior union, Emily, embodied the classic American dream. A man in his early 40s, Richard Hawthorne was the embodiment of charm and charisma. He possessed a commanding aura, radiating confidence and warmth. Highly respected in his community, he had built a thriving career in real estate. Known for his benevolence, Richard frequently contributed to local charities and engaged in community affairs. His commitment to his family was unmistakable, with Karen and Emily always taking precedence in his life. Richard had a unique way of making those around him feel appreciated and significant, an attribute that made him beloved by many. Karen Hawthorne, in her 38s, was a paragon of elegance and kindness. With her caring demeanor and warm smile, she served as the bedrock of the family. Karen had devoted her life to fostering a loving home atmosphere. Actively involved in Emily's school pursuits, she was always ready to volunteer and support her daughter in countless ways. Karen's former marriage had concluded amicably, and she maintained a cordial relationship with Emily's father, further enhancing her standing as a poised and empathetic person. Emily Martin, Karen's daughter from her first marriage, was a lively and astute young woman. At 18, she stood on the cusp of adulthood, readying herself for college. A stellar student, Emily harbored ambitions of becoming a veterinarian. Her affection for animals was clear in her care for the family's pets and her volunteer work at local animal shelters. Over time, Emily had forged a strong connection with her mother and grown to esteem and respect Richard as a paternal figure. Despite the intricacies of blended family life, she felt cherished and secure. The Hawthornes' existence in their scenic suburban abode appeared flawless. Their expansive house frequently echoed with laughter and warmth. Richard and Karen hosted innumerable gatherings, transforming their home into a gathering point for friends and family. They delighted in weekend escapes, family holidays, and tranquil evenings at home. Their social media profiles depicted an immaculate image of their lives, adorned with snapshots of joyous family moments, meals, and vacations. The profound connection between Richard, Karen, and Emily was apparent to all who knew them. They often spent their evenings together, sharing anecdotes about their day over dinner or enjoying films in their snug living room. In the eyes of many, the union of Richard and Karen appeared unshakable, grounded in mutual respect and profound affection. Emily's bond with Richard was similarly robust, with him effortlessly assuming the role of a father, providing counsel and support whenever needed. Friends and neighbors frequently commented on the Hawthornes' good fortune. They seemed to possess everything: a thriving career, a loving marriage, and a promising future for Emily. The family's dynamics were infused with warmth and authentic care for one another. To outsiders, their harmonious family life seemed impervious to disruption. Yet concealed beneath the veneer of this ostensibly perfect family lay concealed strains and secrets poised to surface. The unbreakable bond that once defined them would face unforeseen trials, culminating in a chain of events that would irrevocably alter their lives. On what seemed like an ordinary morning in San Diego on August 14, 2012, the peace of the Hawthorne residence was destroyed by a grim discovery. For Richard Hawthorne's assistant, Mark Ross, the day commenced routinely. Having worked with Richard for several years, Mark was recognized for his diligence, reliability, and scrupulous attention to detail. That morning, he attempted to reach Richard regarding a pivotal meeting slated for that day, a gathering crucial for clinching a lucrative real estate deal. However, despite numerous calls and messages, Richard was unusually non-responsive. Growing increasingly worried, Mark decided to visit Richard's home to ensure his well-being. As he approached the charming suburban house, he instantly noticed something amiss. The garage door was slightly open, revealing Richard's car inside. Mark's heart pounded with a sense of dread. Richard was always fastidious about closing the garage door. Intuiting that something was awry, Mark parked his car and cautiously neared the house. As he drew closer, his unease intensified. Shattered glass near Richard's car caught his eye, sending a chill down his spine. The shards sparkled ominously in the morning light, hinting at a violent disturbance. Mustering his bravery, Mark chose to enter the house through the garage. The door leading from the garage into the kitchen was slightly open, and he nudged it wider, calling out, "Richard, are you here?" His voice resonated through the silent house, met with no reply. The uncanny quiet amplified his trepidation. He tentatively traversed the kitchen, his gaze sweeping the area for any sign of his employer. The kitchen appeared untouched, but as he rounded the corner into the living room, a horrendous sight awaited him. There, on the immaculate white tile floor of the kitchen, lay Richard Hawthorne in a pool of blood. The once dynamic and authoritative man was now motionless, his body marked by numerous stab wounds. Blood flecked the walls and countertops, a stark reminder of the attack's savagery. The coppery scent of blood permeated the air, intermingling with the faint aroma of coffee from an untouched cup on the counter. Mark recoiled, his mind grappling with the ghastly scene before him. Panic coursed through him, and he fumbled for his phone to alert the authorities. His hands trembled as he dialed 911, his voice barely steady as he conveyed the horrifying discovery to the operator. In mere minutes, the tranquil suburban street morphed into a whirlwind of activity as police cars and emergency vehicles descended upon the scene. Spearheading the response was Officer James Monroe, a veteran and esteemed member of the San Diego Police Department. Renowned for his astute investigative instincts and composure under duress, Monroe was tall and formidable, his piercing gaze missing nothing. Though seasoned, the brutality of this particular crime scene momentarily unnerved even him. With a sense of immediacy, Monroe approached the house, his hand poised on his service weapon. Mark, still reeling from shock, briefed him. Mark's face was ashen, his eyes wide with terror. "I came to check on him because he wasn't responding to calls," Mark stuttered, his voice quivering. "I found him like this. I didn't touch anything, I promise, Officer Monroe." Monroe nodded solemnly, his expression severe. "You did the right thing by contacting us," he assured Mark. "Now please wait outside while we secure the area." Cautiously, Monroe entered the house, the pungent odor of blood striking him instantly. He navigated through the kitchen and into the living room, his eyes absorbing every detail. The scene was one of chaos and violence, indicating a ferocious struggle. Richard's body lay splayed on the floor, numerous stab wounds defacing his torso and arms. The blood had started to coagulate, suggesting he had been deceased for several hours. Monroe radioed for reinforcements and began to seal off the area, ensuring the crime scene remained untainted. As he scrutinized the surroundings, he noted the shattered glass in the garage and the toppled furniture in the living room. It was evident that Richard had fought valiantly for his life. Monroe's preliminary assessment suggested a personal attack, fueled by fury and an intent to inflict maximal harm swiftly. Additional officers and crime scene investigators arrived, establishing a perimeter and commencing their painstaking work. The scene buzzed with activity, punctuated by the flashing lights of police cars and the whispers of anxious neighbors gathered at a safe distance. News of the murder spread rapidly, and soon journalists flocked to the site, eager to cover the shocking story. Cameras flashed and reporters vied for positions, keen to capture every detail. Detective Laura Bennett, a seasoned homicide investigator, joined Officer Monroe at the scene. Bennett was celebrated for her incisive mind and persistence, having cracked numerous high-profile cases throughout her career. Together, they began to assemble the initial clues, sharing their observations as they examined the evidence. "It appears Richard was taken by surprise," Bennett remarked, her eyes surveying the blood-splattered kitchen. "Whoever did this was enraged. This isn't a botched robbery," Monroe concurred. "I've witnessed many crime scenes, but this one is personal. The sheer number of stab wounds, the broken glass, it all points to a violent altercation. We need to determine who had a motive to kill him." They discovered Richard's phone, shattered during the struggle, and a trail of bloody footprints leading from the living room to the garage. Clearly, the assailant had fled through the garage door post-murder. Amidst the turmoil, Mark Ross sat on the curb outside the house, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders as a paramedic monitored his vital signs. His thoughts raced, grappling with the horror he had witnessed. He saw the inquisitive faces of neighbors and the flashing lights of news cameras. The once peaceful street was now a tableau of chaos and bewilderment as the preliminary investigation unfolded. As detectives pieced together a timeline of events preceding the murder, they questioned neighbors who offered fragments of information about any unusual activities noticed in recent days. One neighbor recalled hearing raised voices from the Hawthorne residence the night before, but had dismissed it at the time. Within the house, Detective Bennett uncovered a potential lead. Among the scattered papers on the kitchen counter was an envelope addressed to Richard, bearing an unfamiliar return address. She carefully secured it in an evidence bag, hoping it might yield some insight into who had a motive to kill Richard Hawthorne. Throughout the day, the crime scene investigation persisted, with detectives and forensic experts scrupulously examining every inch of the house. The savagery of the crime had stunned everyone involved, and the quest for answers was just beginning. Richard's murder would soon expose the dark and twisted secrets concealed behind the veneer of the Hawthorne family's seemingly flawless life. The investigation would reveal a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and forbidden desires that culminated in this violent end. The community of San Diego would be left shaken as the shocking details emerge, forever altering their perception of the Hawthorne family. The preliminary hypothesis that Richard had been attacked by someone harboring a deep personal grudge began to crystallize. However, as the investigation delved deeper into the lives of Richard, Karen, and Emily, the detectives would discover that the truth was far more sinister and intricate than they could have envisioned. On the morning of the tragic day when Richard Hawthorne was murdered, both Karen and Emily Hawthorne were absent from home. Karen was at a charity event she had organized, while Emily attended a friend's birthday party. They had both departed early in the morning, leaving Richard alone in the house. Little did Karen know the idyllic facade of their family life was about to be demolished. As news of Richard's murder spread, the police succeeded in reaching Karen first. She was still at the charity event when she received the call. Her initial reaction was one of shock and incredulity, but she swiftly regained her composure and made her way to the police station. Upon arrival, she was met by Detective Laura Bennett, who had assumed command of the case. Karen appeared visibly distressed, yet surprisingly composed. Her demeanor was not what one might expect from a woman who had just lost her husband. She responded to the detective's inquiries with a measured calm, detailing her whereabouts that morning and expressing concern for her daughter Emily. At a charity event and a birthday party, respectively, we spent the morning, Karen informed Detective Bennett. Around 8:00 a.m., I departed home, with Emily following shortly thereafter. Detective Bennett observed Karen's composed demeanor. Despite her sorrow, she appeared almost disconnected, sparking initial doubts. However, Bennett understood that individuals coped with trauma differently. After collecting essential details, she permitted Karen to contact Emily. Shortly after receiving her mother's call, Emily arrived at the police station, visibly upset and anxious. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking escape. As Detective Bennett began her questioning, Emily's nervousness was evident. "Emily, we must know your whereabouts this morning," Bennett inquired gently. I attended a friend's birthday party," Emily stammered. "I left around the same time as Mom." Emily's unease was clear. She avoided eye contact, her hands fidgeting, giving detectives the impression she was concealing something. Despite her discomfort, she corroborated Karen's account of their morning activities. Post-initial questioning, police allowed Karen and Emily to leave, but they couldn't return home due to the ongoing crime scene investigation. Instead, they stayed with Karen's mother overnight. Back at the Hawthorne residence, forensic experts diligently scoured the house for evidence. Among their findings was an envelope addressed to Richard, discovered on the kitchen counter. Detective Bennett carefully opened it, revealing a letter from Emily. Its contents shocked the detectives. Emily expressed her anguish and desire to end an illicit relationship with Richard. This revelation added a staggering layer to the case, steering the investigation in a new direction. However, police kept this information confidential until they could verify its authenticity. The next day, Emily was summoned back to the police station for a follow-up interview. Detectives were resolved to unveil the truth about her relationship with Richard and its potential link to his murder. Emily arrived, her anxiety more pronounced, hands trembling as she sat across from Detective Bennett. "Emily, we discovered a letter at the scene," Bennett began, her tone resolute yet empathetic. "It implies you were involved with Richard. Can you elaborate? Emily's face paled, tears brimming in her eyes. She knew the truth could no longer be concealed. After a brief silence, she nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes, it's true, she confessed. Richard and we had a relationship. It began shortly after my 18th birthday. Detective Bennett listened attentively as Emily detailed the genesis of their forbidden liaison. She shared how Richard had always shown her kindness, offering more affection and attention than her biological father ever had. As Emily reached adulthood, this attention evolved into something deeper. Initially, it was bewildering, Emily admitted, her voice quavering. He made me feel special, and I believed I loved him. But it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, especially because of Mom. I felt like I was betraying her. According to Emily, their relationship lasted approximately 6 months. She described the escalating difficulty of maintaining a normal family facade while concealing their secret. The guilt and shame became insurmountable, culminating in the letter she penned to end the affair. I couldn't bear it anymore, she wept. I wanted out. I felt ensnared, and I knew it had to cease. Despite confessing to the relationship, Emily fervently denied any role in Richard's murder. She maintained that she had been at her friend's gathering all morning and had no clue who could have taken his life. I didn't do it, she implored. I would never harm him. Despite everything, I just wanted it all to end. Detective Bennett and her team found themselves with more queries than responses. Emily's admission of the affair presented a potential motive for murder, yet her denial of involvement necessitated further investigation. The detectives were resolved to untangle this web of deception and betrayal, revealing the truth behind Richard Hawthorne's brutal demise. In the wake of Emily's stunning revelation about her affair with Richard, the police were compelled to reevaluate their comprehension of the case. Detective Laura Bennett and her team hypothesized that Karen might have uncovered the affair and, consumed by rage and betrayal, slain Richard. The crime's nature hinted at a possible act of retribution, mandating exploration of every avenue. Karen was summoned to the police station once more. As she sat in the interrogation room, her expression was a blend of bewilderment and apprehension. She had been cooperative during the initial inquiry, but this time, the detectives possessed far more disturbing information to confront her with. Karen, Detective Bennett commenced, her tone grave yet empathetic. We have discovered some new information we need to discuss with you. Concerning Emily and Richard? Karen's eyes widened with concern. What about them? What's happening? Drawing a deep breath, Detective Bennett chose to reveal everything. We've uncovered that Emily and Richard were engaged in an inappropriate relationship. Emily has confessed to having an affair with Richard. Silence momentarily enveloped the room. Shock registered on Karen's face, her eyes welling with tears as she shook her head in denial. No, that can't be true. It's impossible, she whispered. I'm afraid it is, Bennett responded gently. Emily confirmed it herself. Karen's shock swiftly morphed into a torrent of emotions. She wept inconsolably, her sobs resonating in the small space. Clutching her chest, she seemed to try to hold herself together. How could he? How could they? Her sobs transformed into angry outbursts. That bastard! I trusted him. I trusted both of them, she cried, her voice cracking. He betrayed me, and she's my daughter. The detectives gave Karen time to regain her composure. Once calm, Bennett resumed the interrogation, aiming to gather Karen's perspective. Karen, I comprehend how difficult this is, Bennett said softly, but we need to know what you were aware of regarding their relationship. Did you ever harbor any suspicions? Karen dabbed her tears, taking deep, quivering breaths. I didn't know for certain, but I had my doubts over the past month. I noticed Emily acting differently. She was distant, secretive. I tried talking to her, but she always dismissed me. She paused, gathering her thoughts. And Richard, he was behaving strangely too. He was excessively attentive to Emily, always finding reasons to be near her. I started to worry, but I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I was imagining things. Karen's voice steadied as she spoke. I confronted Richard once. I asked him if anything was going on, but he denied it. Made me feel like I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe him. Detective Bennett nodded, jotting down notes. Karen, where were you on the morning of Richard's murder? Karen met Bennett's gaze directly, her expression sincere. I was at a charity event. You can verify it with the organizers. They'll corroborate my presence. I have witnesses who saw me there all morning. The detectives noted her alibi, which appeared solid. They lacked immediate evidence directly linking Karen to the crime scene. However, her emotional response and the suspicions she held added intricacy to the case. Karen, we grasp how overwhelming this is, Bennett said, but we must be meticulous. We don't possess sufficient evidence at this juncture to accuse you of anything, but we had to consider every possibility. Karen nodded, still visibly distraught. I understand. I can't believe this is happening. My family is crumbling. And now Richard? I didn't kill him, detective. I swear I didn't. Upon Karen's departure, the police persisted in their painstaking work at the Hawthorne residence. Forensic specialists scoured every corner of the house, seeking any hints that could reveal the murderer. The envelope containing Emily's letter was meticulously examined for fingerprints and other forensic evidence. The letter's contents offered a pivotal insight into the Hawthorne household's dynamics, highlighting the significant emotional turmoil caused by the affair. However, whether this turmoil led to murder remained unclear. As the investigation into Richard Hawthorne's murder progressed, the police discovered another potential lead. They found that Karen's former husband, David Carter, resided in a nearby San Diego suburb with his second wife, Linda. David, a rugged blue-collar worker, had a troubled past. He had met Karen in college, and they wed young, but their union was tumultuous. Post-divorce, David moved on, remarried, and attempted to rebuild his life. Despite the split, he maintained a strong connection with his daughter, Emily. The police learned of Emily's closeness to her father, prompting them to visit David to gather more insights into the relationships between Emily, Richard, and the rest of the family. They were also eager to understand David's sentiments towards Richard. Upon arrival at David's residence, Detective Laura Bennett and her partner, Officer Michael Stevens, were greeted by Linda, who informed them of David's absence. He's working at a nearby construction site, she said, providing the location. The detectives proceeded to the construction site, finding David engrossed in his work. Tall and muscular, his weathered face bore the marks of years of labor. Noticing his heavily bandaged right hand, Bennett inquired about the injury. David glanced at his bandaged hand, replying, I cut myself on the job a couple of days ago. It's nothing serious. Bennett acknowledged his response, but the bandage stirred her suspicions. She briefed David on the situation, detailing Richard's murder and the recently revealed affair between Richard and Emily. David's expression darkened, his eyes reflecting a blend of shock and anger. I was unaware of this affair, he stated, his voice taut. But I had no involvement in Richard's murder. I was at work that morning. Detective Bennett remained dubious. They decided to corroborate David's alibi by contacting his foreman. The foreman confirmed David's absence from work that morning, claiming he was nursing an injury sustained while cleaning his backyard. This inconsistency heightened suspicions, leading the police to take David into custody for further interrogation at the station. They collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample and obtained a search warrant for his house. During the investigation, a knife discovered in the garage was sent for forensic examination. The analysis unveiled a match between the DNA on the knife and Richard's blood, as well as David's DNA at the crime scene. These findings were pivotal, leading the police to formally arrest David for Richard's murder. A major breakthrough occurred when phone records indicated that Emily had spoken to her father the day preceding Richard's death. During this conversation, Emily had shared her distress and remorse about her affair with Richard. Consumed by rage and a sense of betrayal, David resolved to take action. On the morning of the murder, David drove to Richard and Karen's neighborhood, parking several blocks away. He waited until he saw Karen and Emily depart, then seized his chance. Entering through the garage, David found Richard in the kitchen preparing breakfast. A violent confrontation ensued immediately. In a blind fury, David assaulted Richard. The men fought desperately, toppling furniture and shattering dishes. Despite accidentally cutting himself, David persisted in his brutal attack with the knife, leaving Richard with multiple fatal stab wounds. With this new evidence, the police pieced together a clearer sequence of events culminating in Richard's murder. David's uncontrolled anger and sense of betrayal had driven him to commit a horrendous crime, shattering the lives of all involved. The trial of David Carter for the murder of Richard Hawthorne commenced in early 2013, gripping the entire San Diego community. Tension filled the courtroom as the prosecution presented their case, meticulously outlining the events leading to Richard's violent death. The affair between Richard and Emily, the physical evidence linking David to the crime scene, and the emotional testimonies from Karen and Emily depicted a man driven to extremes by betrayal and rage. David's defense team argued that he had acted in a moment of temporary insanity, overwhelmed by the shocking revelation of the affair between his daughter and his ex-wife's husband. They portrayed him as a devoted father who had briefly lost control, highlighting his previously clean criminal record and strong bond with Emily. Emily's testimony was particularly heart-wrenching. She recounted the phone call with her father the day before the murder, describing how she had confided in him about her relationship with Richard. Her voice quivered as she explained feeling trapped and guilty, ultimately leading her to end the affair. The emotional gravity of her words deeply impacted everyone in the courtroom. Karen also testified, her composure barely concealing her inner turmoil. She recounted her escalating suspicions about Richard and Emily's relationship and the shock of discovering the truth. Her pain was evident, her voice faltering as she spoke of the man she once loved and the daughter she now found difficult to trust. The prosecution presented compelling forensic evidence, including DNA analysis linking David to the murder weapon and the crime scene. A knife discovered in David's garage bearing Richard's blood served as a pivotal piece of evidence, bolstering the prosecution's case. Following weeks of emotional testimony and rigorous legal debate, the jury deliberated for 2 days before delivering a verdict. David Carter was convicted of second-degree murder, a charge acknowledging his crime was committed in a moment of passion, yet holding him responsible for his actions. He received a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Contemplating the tragic case of Richard Hawthorne's murder, I am overwhelmed by a blend of shock and sorrow. What initially appeared as an idyllic family life devolved into a saga of betrayal, illicit love, and brutal vengeance. The revelation of the clandestine affair between Richard and his stepdaughter Emily was staggering, and witnessing its ripple effects on all involved was heartrending. David Carter's deeds, fueled by a father's misguided protective instincts, serve as a chilling reminder of the potency and peril of unbridled emotions. This case has provoked deep reflection on the significance of honesty and open communication in relationships. It stands as a stark caution that secrets and deceit can culminate in catastrophic outcomes. Ultimately, the tragedy in San Diego exemplifies the somber intricacies that can hide beneath the facade of seemingly flawless lives. It is a narrative that will linger with me, underscoring the delicate nature of trust and the imperative of addressing harsh realities before they escalate beyond control. In the picturesque and tranquil suburb of Collinsville, Illinois, an event transpired on August 15, 2017, that would send ripples of shock through the close-knit community, leaving no resident untouched. This peaceful haven, nestled away from the bustle of city life, was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, where children played freely on the streets, and where the most exciting events were often nothing more than the annual bake sale or the high school football games. The news of a heinous crime, a murder, shattered the peaceful facade, stirring a sense of unease and dread that would linger for years to come. The morning of August 15th began much like any other in Collinsville. The sun rose, casting a warm glow over the well-manicured lawns and picket fences. Residents woke to the familiar sounds of birds chirping and the distant hum of lawnmowers. Children prepared for another day of summer vacation, while adults commuted to work, sipping coffee and listening to the morning news. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the promise of another peaceful day. Little did they know, their world was about to be turned upside down. As the clock struck noon, the serene atmosphere was abruptly disrupted by the jarring sound of sirens. Police cars and ambulances, their lights flashing urgently, sped down the usually quiet Taylor Street. The sudden cacophony drew residents from their homes, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. They gathered in small clusters along the sidewalks, exchanging puzzled glances and whispered speculations. Rumors began to circulate, each one more alarming than the last, but none could prepare them for the grim reality that would soon unfold. The emergency services arrived at a modest, two-story house nestled among the trees. The scene that awaited them was one of profound tragedy. The lifeless body of a young girl lay amidst the tranquil setting, her life cruelly cut short. The sight sent a wave of horror through the first responders, who swiftly cordoned off the area, their faces grim and determined. The news spread like wildfire through the community, leaving a trail of disbelief and anguish in its wake. The tragic tale that emerged would forever change the lives of those who called Collinsville home. James Harper, a native of Collinsville, was a man who once held the promise of a bright future. At 30 years old, he was known throughout the town for his charismatic personality and impressive athletic abilities. In his high school days, he was the star of the football team, his name chanted by adoring crowds as he led the Collinsville Cougars to victory after victory. His dreams of a professional career in sports seemed within reach, and his future appeared destined for greatness. Linda Harper, née Johnson, was a force to be reckoned with in the business world. At just 28 years old, she had already made a name for herself as a successful businesswoman, her sharp intellect and unwavering determination propelling her up the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago. Born and raised in a small town much like Collinsville, Linda possessed an unyielding ambition that set her apart from her peers. Her steely resolve and keen business acumen commanded respect and admiration from colleagues and competitors alike. The paths of James and Linda crossed during their senior year at Northwestern University. Linda was pursuing a degree in marketing, her sights set on a successful career in the corporate world. James, meanwhile, was a star athlete on the university's football team, majoring in sports management with dreams of turning his passion into a profession. Their first encounter occurred at a university charity event where Linda, volunteering as an organizer, caught James's eye with her efficient management and captivating presence. Intrigued by her organizational prowess and drawn to her beauty, James struck up a conversation. They quickly discovered a shared love for adventure and travel, their mutual passions sparking an instant connection. Their relationship blossomed rapidly, with James's charm and athleticism complementing Linda's intelligence and drive. They became a power couple on campus, their names synonymous with success and popularity. Together, they attended parties and events, always in the spotlight, their futures seemingly intertwined and destined for greatness. However, the events of August 15, 2017, would cast a dark shadow over their lives and the lives of those around them. The idyllic facade of Collinsville had been irrevocably shattered, and the once peaceful community would grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy for years to come. The story of James and Linda Harper would serve as a stark reminder that even in the most serene of settings, darkness can lurk, and fate can take a cruel and unexpected turn. In the realm of professional football, James was on the cusp of a promising career, while Linda harbored ambitious plans to ascend the corporate ranks in the marketing sphere. Their future appeared radiant and filled with promise. However, an abrupt shift occurred when James sustained a grave knee injury during his final game of the season. This injury not only terminated his football aspirations, but also burdened him with chronic pain and a profound sense of purposelessness. Throughout his recuperation, Linda remained steadfast by his side, offering unyielding support and affection. Undeterred by this setback, they chose to wed soon after graduation, believing their love could conquer any adversity. Initially, their union was robust. They settled into an expansive and opulent home in Collinsville, Illinois, boasting a generous backyard and a shimmering swimming pool. Linda swiftly ascended the corporate ladder at a distinguished marketing firm in Chicago, securing a lucrative position that enabled them to uphold their extravagant lifestyle. Meanwhile, James floundered, unable to pursue his dream of professional football. He undertook various jobs, none of which endured due to his physical constraints and mounting exasperation. As time wore on, the equilibrium in their relationship began to alter. Linda's career thrived, requiring lengthy hours and frequent travel. Conversely, James grew increasingly morose and resentful. He grappled with his new reality, feeling emasculated by his inability to contribute financially. The once dynamic and adventurous man morphed into a mere specter of his former self, consumed by acrimony and self-commiseration. With Linda often absent for work, James sought refuge in the company of his friends. Their residence, with its alluring pool and spacious backyard, became a frequent gathering spot. James hosted get-togethers, inviting his friends for barbecues and pool parties. These events often involved copious drinking and computer gaming, providing a transient respite from his feelings of inadequacy. The air resonated with laughter and the clinking of glasses, veiling the underlying strain in his life. James's companions were an eclectic mix of local acquaintances, many sharing his enthusiasm for gaming and socializing. They would while away hours by the pool, basking in the sun, indulging in beer, and engaging in animated discussions about sports and life. Inside the house, James would retreat to his gaming setup, losing himself in virtual realms where he could briefly forget his frustrations. The blend of alcohol and gaming offered a fleeting sense of contentment, but did little to confront the core of his discontent. Crafting a facade of prosperity, James reveled in displaying his Dodge Challenger, basking in the admiration it drew as he cruised around town. He regaled inquisitive individuals with tales of his purported triumphs in cryptocurrency trading, projecting an image of financial security and autonomy. Yet his actual involvement in cryptocurrency was scant and erratic, more a pastime than a genuine income source. The luxurious car and the guise of a successful trader were elements of a persona he cultivated to conceal his deep-seated insecurities. The Harper residence, a monument to Linda's diligence and accomplishments, presented a jarring contrast to James's inner turmoil. The expansive, contemporary home boasted all the hallmarks of affluence: meticulously landscaped grounds, an immaculate swimming pool, and tastefully appointed interiors. To outsiders, the Harpers embodied the quintessential American dream, a flawless couple enjoying the fruits of their labor. However, beneath this veneer, their union was crumbling. James's animosity towards Linda intensified daily. He begrudged her success and her role as the principal wage earner, feelings that left him emasculated and inconsequential. As he witnessed Linda's ascent, his self-esteem plummeted, mired in a cycle of purposelessness. This bitterness manifested in emotional detachment and escalating disputes, placing further strain on their relationship. Linda found herself in a precarious situation. She held deep affection for James and yearned to bolster him, but the rigors of her career and the pressure to sustain their lifestyle were overwhelming. Her attempts to reconcile their growing divide were frequently met with antagonism and apathy from James. The emotional weight of being the sole provider and the stress of their disintegrating bond exacted a heavy toll on her. Adjacent to the Harpers resided the Matthews family. Susan Matthews, a 45-year-old single mother, served as a nurse at the local hospital. With over 2 decades of dedicated service, she was renowned for her conscientiousness and empathy. Susan was a pillar of strength, confronting life's challenges with unyielding fortitude. Her commitment to her profession was driven not solely by duty, but also by the necessity to provide for her daughter, Caitlin. Despite her unflagging work ethic, the years of balancing lengthy shifts and single parenthood had left their mark. Susan often appeared fatigued, her eyes reflecting the burden of weariness and the silent acknowledgement of her endured hardships. Nevertheless, beneath her exhausted exterior lay a heart brimming with love and an unyielding resolve to secure a brighter future for her daughter. At 20 years old, Caitlin Matthews presented a striking contrast to her mother in numerous ways. A student at the local college, she radiated vitality and optimism. Her luminous smile and cheerful disposition served as a beacon of light in the otherwise humdrum routine of Susan's life. Caitlin had inherited her mother's tenacity, but also possessed a dreamy, idealistic spirit. Her trusting and open-hearted nature made her beloved among her peers, yet also left her vulnerable. The Matthews family resided in a modest, well-maintained home that Susan had managed to retain through sheer resolve and diligence. Though smaller than the Harpers' lavish residence, their house was filled with warmth and love. Susan had created a sanctuary for Caitlin, a place where they could both find refuge amidst life's trials. Their bond was unbreakable, tempered by shared hardships and a mutual comprehension of their situation. Despite their financial limitations, Susan ensured that Caitlin had every opportunity to flourish. She championed her daughter's education and encouraged her to harbor grand aspirations, hoping that Caitlin would accomplish all that she herself had once dreamed of. In turn, Caitlin held deep admiration for her mother and was driven by Susan's sacrifices. She was resolved to make her mother proud and often conveyed her gratitude through small acts of kindness, such as preparing dinner after Susan's lengthy shifts or surprising her with heartfelt notes of appreciation. Their close-knit relationship, however, was not devoid of challenges. Susan's taxing job often left her physically and emotionally depleted, allowing little time for leisure or personal endeavors. Caitlin, though understanding and patient, occasionally felt the void left by her mother's absence. Yet they both traversed these obstacles with grace and empathy, always prioritizing each other's well-being. Living adjacent to the Harpers, Susan and Caitlin were cognizant of their neighbors' divergent lifestyle. The Matthews' simple, industrious life stood in stark contrast to the Harpers' ostensible affluence and extravagance. Susan, while amiable, maintained a respectful distance, focusing on her duties and eschewing unnecessary interactions. Caitlin, however, was more gregarious, frequently exchanging pleasantries with the Harpers and other neighbors. It was a radiant, sunny day in July. The sky was a resplendent blue, dotted with a few wispy clouds drifting languidly across it. The sun beamed down, casting a warm, golden glow over the suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped merrily in the trees, and the scent of blooming flowers permeated the air. It was one of those quintessential summer days that seemed to beckon relaxation and enjoyment. Linda's business trip to Chicago left James to his own devices. James Harper, as was his custom, lazed by the pool with two companions. Their laughter and conversation filled the air as they basked in the sun, beers in hand. Clad in swim trunks and a loose tank top, James was in his element, relishing the lazy afternoon. The sounds of splashing water and lively chatter created a tranquil ambiance. Next door, Caitlin Matthews tended to her mother's garden, watering the vibrant blooms in their backyard. She wore a simple sundress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, humming a tune as she moved from plant to plant. Her mother, Susan, was at work, leaving Caitlin to care for the house. Noticing Caitlin over the fence, James decided it was time for a proper introduction. He had seen her before, but they had never truly spoken. Intrigued, he felt a sudden urge to know her better. Setting his beer down, he approached the fence and called out to her. "Hey, Caitlin, right?" James said with a warm smile. "Why not take a break and join us by the pool? We've got plenty of cold beer and good company." Caitlin looked up, startled. She hadn't expected James to speak to her, let alone invite her over. Glancing at the two men by the pool, she felt a twinge of hesitation. "Oh, thanks, but I should probably finish up here," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. James wasn't one to surrender easily. "Come on, it's a gorgeous day. Just for a couple of hours, you deserve a break too," he persuaded, his tone inviting. Caitlin bit her lip, wavering between her initial reluctance and growing curiosity. Her mother was at work, and she had no pressing tasks. Perhaps a little relaxation wouldn't hurt. She finally agreed, "All right, just for a little while," setting the watering can aside. James's face brightened with a victorious smile. "Great, come on over," he said, opening the gate between their yards. Caitlin walked over, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. James introduced her to his friends, who welcomed her with friendly smiles. They handed her a cold beer, and soon she found herself sitting by the pool, chatting and laughing with them. The atmosphere was relaxed and inviting, and Caitlin began to feel more at ease. James observed Caitlin with newfound interest. There was something about her that captivated him, her genuineness and kindness, qualities seemingly rare in his world. As the afternoon wore on, they discussed various topics, her studies, his interests, and the neighborhood. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and James felt a connection forming. Caitlin, too, found herself drawn to James. He was charming and attentive, making her feel special in a way she hadn't experienced before. Their bond deepened, and the afternoon passed in a haze of laughter and shared stories, marking the beginning of an unexpected friendship. A burgeoning connection with James enveloped Caitlin as they exchanged tales and laughter. This unforeseen encounter sparked a friendship that would soon blossom into something more profound. From that day forward, James began inviting Caitlin over more often, whenever his friends congregated by the pool. He ensured she was always included. What started as informal gatherings gradually became a routine. Caitlin found herself anticipating these moments, relishing the fellowship and sense of belonging she felt with James and his companions. 2 weeks after their first meeting, on a balmy Friday evening, they were once again unwinding by the pool. The setting sun bathed the water in a golden glow as the group's spirits soared with laughter and clinking beer bottles. As the night cooled, James proposed they retreat indoors. "Hey, Caitlin," he said, capturing her attention. "Care to join me for some video games in the basement? It'll be a blast." Caitlin paused briefly, then agreed. "Sure, why not?" she responded, enticed by the prospect. Leaving his friends poolside, James guided Caitlin into the house and down to the basement. The cool interior offered respite from the summer heat. The expansive, well-appointed basement boasted a large TV and numerous gaming consoles. Caitlin settled onto the couch while James prepared the game. Soon the room echoed with their laughter and playful exchanges. The game provided a perfect diversion, allowing them to unwind and savor each other's company. As they played, their bond intensified, fueled by shared delight. After some time, a pause in their conversation ensued. Caitlin glanced at James, noting how his gaze rested on her. The atmosphere felt electric, charged with unvoiced tension. Her heart raced, a blend of nervousness and exhilaration pulsing through her. James took a deep breath, then leaned closer. "Caitlin," he whispered, his voice gentle and tentative, I've been wanting to do this for some time." Before Caitlin could utter a response, James tenderly pressed his lips to hers. Initially hesitant, the kiss was a blend of uncertainty and yearning. Caitlin's surprise swiftly transformed into a surge of emotions, a spark of passion intertwined with vulnerability. Their kiss deepened, intensifying as they both yielded to the moment. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Caitlin gazed into James's eyes, mirroring her own confusion and desire. The kiss had stirred something within her, a mix of exhilaration and a twinge of guilt and uncertainty. James, too, wrestled with his feelings. He was drawn to Caitlin powerfully, but also felt a sense of inner turmoil. He understood the risks, yet the connection between them was undeniable. This kiss had brought them closer, marking the onset of a complex and stormy relationship. That moment in the basement was a harbinger of what lay ahead. From then on, their interactions brimmed with newfound intensity. James continued to invite Caitlin over, their time together becoming more frequent and intimate. What had begun as a simple friendship was now evolving into something profound, replete with passion and challenges. The bond between James and Caitlin flourished rapidly, taking on a life of its own. What started as an innocent friendship swiftly morphed into a clandestine and passionate affair. The thrill of their secret encounters added an exhilarating element neither had experienced before. They grew adept at finding stolen moments, always cautious to keep their burgeoning relationship concealed from prying eyes. For James, this affair offered a much-needed respite from the tedium and frustrations of his daily life. His marriage to Linda had long lost its luster, and the pressures of his injury and unemployment had eroded his self-esteem. Caitlin's youthful enthusiasm and genuine affection breathed new life into him, making him feel desired and alive once more. He eagerly anticipated their secret rendezvous, the excitement fueling a renewed sense of purpose. Caitlin, meanwhile, felt an intense connection with James, unlike anything she had known before. He made her feel cherished and significant, filling a void left by her father's passing and her mother's constant absence due to work. Drawn to James's confidence and charm, she reveled in the attention he bestowed upon her. Their relationship provided her with a sense of belonging and importance, something she had longed for deeply. As their secret affair unfolded, both James and Caitlin found solace and exhilaration in each other's company. Each stolen moment was a sanctuary from their respective struggles, a place where they could be truly seen and understood. Yet amidst the passion and excitement, the shadows of guilt and uncertainty lingered, hinting at the complexities that lay ahead. Whenever opportunity allowed, they convened, frequently transforming the Harper residence into their clandestine meeting ground when Linda was away on business or working late. The secluded pool area and expansive basement became havens where they could be united without fear of intrusion. These secret rendezvous were charged with intense emotions as they navigated the intricacies of their forbidden love. Their time together was filled with laughter, hushed conversations, and tender moments that fortified their bond. They shared hopes and dreams, fears and insecurities, forging a deep emotional connection that transcended the physical. James often confided in Caitlin about his struggles and frustrations, and she listened with empathy and understanding, offering the support he yearned for. In return, James provided Caitlin with a sense of security and admiration, making her feel valued and cherished. Their physical relationship grew more ardent and intimate with each encounter as they explored their desires and fantasies, finding solace and pleasure in each other's embrace. The secrecy of their affair only intensified their connection. Every stolen kiss and touch carried the thrill of potential discovery, adding an exhilarating edge to their time together. Yet amidst the passion and excitement, both James and Caitlin recognized the fragile nature of their relationship. They understood that their affair was built on a foundation of secrecy and deception, and that their actions could inflict immense pain and damage if exposed. However, the intensity of their feelings often eclipsed these concerns, as they became increasingly enthralled by the rush of being together. As weeks turned into months, their bond deepened, and they found themselves increasingly intertwined. They began to share more personal details, cultivating an intimacy that extended beyond their physical connection. Caitlin confided in James about her college struggles and future aspirations, while James opened up about his marital frustrations and his yearning for a more fulfilling life. These conversations drew them closer, forging a connection that felt indestructible. James started making subtle adjustments to his life to accommodate his relationship with Caitlin. He created opportunities to see her, whether by running errands near her college or arranging to be home when she was available. Caitlin, too, found herself making adjustments, carefully balancing her studies and responsibilities with her desire to be with James. They became adept at maintaining their double lives, always meticulous in keeping up appearances and avoiding suspicion. Their secret world was a delicate dance of stolen moments and shared confidences, a sanctuary where they could escape the realities of their lives. Yet even as their bond grew stronger, the specter of discovery loomed, casting a shadow of uncertainty over their forbidden love. Their liaison also profoundly affected their emotional states. For James, the affair was a much-needed boost to his confidence and self-esteem. He felt revitalized and inspired, as if granted a second chance at happiness. Caitlin, meanwhile, experienced a sense of contentment and joy she had never known before. Their time together was a source of solace and excitement, helping them navigate the trials and tribulations of their daily lives. Despite their vigilance, the strain of keeping their secret began to weigh heavily. The constant need for secrecy and the fear of exposure created an underlying tension that was hard to dismiss. Both James and Caitlin grew more cautious, always alert for signs of suspicion from those around them. They understood that their affair could not remain hidden indefinitely, but neither was willing to relinquish the connection they had forged. As their relationship deepened, the emotional stakes escalated. They found themselves envisioning a future together, imagining a life where they could openly express their love without fear of judgment or repercussions. These daydreams offered a temporary respite from the reality of their situation, allowing them to indulge in the possibility of a different existence. However, the harsh truth of their circumstances hung over them, a constant reminder of the potential fallout of their actions. Their relationship also began to influence their interactions with others. James struggled to maintain his composure around Linda, the guilt of his infidelity gnawing at his conscience. He became more distant and irritable, often snapping in frustration. Caitlin, too, found it challenging to conceal her feelings, finding it difficult to concentrate on her studies and maintain her relationships with friends and family. One evening, Linda returned from a business trip earlier than anticipated, hoping to surprise James. She had planned this spontaneous gesture to rekindle some passion in their strained marriage. As she quietly entered the house, Linda noticed the unusual silence, expecting to find James in his usual spot by the pool or in the living room. Puzzled, her attention was drawn to the dim light emanating from the master bedroom upstairs. Curiosity mixed with excitement as Linda ascended the stairs, careful not to make a sound. Her heart pounded with anticipation of the surprise she was about to spring on her husband. However, as she reached the doorway of the master bedroom, she was confronted with a sight that shattered her world. There in their marital bed were James and Caitlin, locked in an intimate embrace. Linda's mind raced as she tried to process the scene before her. The initial shock quickly gave way to a blinding rage fueled by betrayal and heartache. She lunged at Caitlin, screaming and flailing wildly. Her sudden assault caught both James and Caitlin off guard. James attempted to restrain Linda, shouting for her to stop, but his efforts were in vain. The room echoed with Linda's anguished cries and the chaotic scuffle that ensued. The once peaceful sanctuary of their home was now a battleground of raw emotions and shattered trust. The repercussions of their secret affair had abruptly and violently surfaced, leaving all parties involved to grapple with the devastating aftermath. Caitlin, panic-stricken and disoriented, managed to wrench free from Linda's grasp. Clutching her clothes tightly, she dashed from the bedroom, desperate for escape. Linda, propelled by a mix of rage and heartache, pursued her down the hallway. As Caitlin reached the staircase, Linda caught up and with a forceful shove, sent Caitlin plummeting down the stairs. Caitlin's body tumbled and twisted uncontrollably, finally landing with a sickening thud on the cold granite floor below. James watched in horror as Caitlin lay motionless at the foot of the stairs. He rushed to her side, his heart plummeting as he took in the severity of her injuries. Her neck was at an unnatural angle, and a pool of blood formed beneath her head. It was evident that she had not survived the fall. Overwhelmed with guilt and disbelief, James scrambled to his feet and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he relayed the situation to the dispatcher. Within minutes, the air filled with the wail of sirens as police and paramedics descended upon the Harper residence. The officers entered the house to find a scene of chaos. James was kneeling beside Caitlin's lifeless body, tears streaming down his face. Linda, in a state of shock, sat on the floor at the top of the stairs, her hands stained with Caitlin's blood, staring blankly ahead. The officers quickly assessed the situation, while paramedics confirmed that Caitlin had succumbed to her injuries. The police then turned their attention to Linda and James. Linda was arrested on the spot, handcuffed, and led away, still in a daze. James, visibly shaken, was questioned by the officers. He recounted the events, explaining how Linda had attacked Caitlin in a fit of rage, ultimately causing her fatal fall. News of Caitlin's death spread rapidly. Susan Matthews, Caitlin's mother, was at work when she received the devastating call. Her colleagues tried to console her as she broke down in tears, the reality of her daughter's death hitting her like a tidal wave. The heartbreak and anguish were palpable as Susan struggled to grasp the loss of her beloved daughter. Back at the Harper residence, the police conducted a meticulous investigation. They documented the scene, taking photographs and collecting evidence. The once tranquil and elegant home was now a crime scene, marred by the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The stark contrast between the former serenity and the current chaos underscored the devastating impact of the events that had transpired. As the investigation continued, the weight of the tragedy hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the lives forever altered by the day's harrowing events. The trial evolved into a media spectacle, meticulously covered by local outlets. Journalists and camera crews congregated outside the courthouse, eager to capture every nuance of the case that had stunned the community. Inside the courtroom, emotions surged as the grim particulars of that fateful day were recounted. Linda's defense centered around her claim of temporary insanity, asserting that she had acted in a moment of uncontrollable rage upon discovering her husband's infidelity. Her lawyers argued that the shock and betrayal had overwhelmed her, leading to her violent outburst. Linda herself appeared fragile and remorseful, her once composed demeanor shattered by the gravity of her actions. Despite the emotional testimonies and pleas for leniency, the prosecution presented a starkly different narrative. They emphasized the premeditated nature of Linda's attack, highlighting her pursuit of Caitlin and the fatal push down the stairs. James's testimony against Linda proved pivotal as he recounted the horrific events and the deliberate nature of her actions. The jury was shown graphic evidence, including photographs and witness accounts, leaving little room for doubt. After weeks of intense deliberation, the jury found Linda guilty of first-degree murder under Illinois state law. The judge, acknowledging the severity of the crime, sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, as mandated by state statutes for premeditated murder. Linda's face was a mask of despair as the verdict was read, her life irrevocably altered by a moment of violent rage. James, grappling with his own guilt and grief, was left to pick up the shattered remnants of their lives. He inherited his wife's substantial estate, including their lavish home and assets. However, the material wealth offered scant comfort. Haunted by memories of Caitlin and the knowledge that his actions had led to such a tragic end, James found himself isolated and consumed by regret. The life he had once known was gone, leaving him to confront a future marred by loneliness and sorrow. Witnessing the case of Linda Harper unfold was a chilling experience. Seeing her life spiral into violence and culminate in such a brutal act was shocking. Her vicious attack on Caitlin Matthews, fueled by rage over the affair with her husband James, resulted in a conviction for first-degree murder. The courtroom testimonies and evidence left no doubt about her guilt. Linda's life sentence without parole felt just, yet the tragedy left an indelible mark on all involved. James's guilt and isolation, despite inheriting the estate, underscored the profound scars left by this devastating series of events. The trial served as a stark reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and betrayal, and the irreparable damage they can inflict on lives and communities. In the bucolic, serene town of Cedar Grove, the horrifying murder of Henry Callahan sent seismic shockwaves echoing through the community. The seemingly peaceful, close-knit suburban enclave was torn asunder by a crime fueled by passion and betrayal, revealing the dark secrets hidden beneath the surface of apparently idyllic lives. As the tempest unfolded in August 2015, the Callahans found themselves at its very center. Henry, a charismatic and shrewd 50-year-old real estate magnate, renowned for his business prowess, and Clara, a stylish and enchanting 48-year-old boutique owner, celebrated for her fashion sense and magnetic personality, had been esteemed figures in the community for over 15 years. Their marriage was regarded as perfect, almost too perfect, by all who knew them. They were intimate friends with their next-door neighbors, the Parkers, Simon, an erudite university professor, and Emily, a talented landscape architect. The Parkers, along with their 21-year-old son Jerry, had recently moved to Cedar Grove, seeking refuge from the chaos of urban life and yearning for a quieter existence. Little did these neighbors know that their lives were about to be catastrophically upended. In truth, this description barely scratches the surface. Their lives were about to shatter in a manner that would send reverberations throughout the community and even the country. Henry Callahan had always been a man driven by ambition. Born into a middle-class family in Detroit, he propelled himself up the real estate industry ladder through sheer force of will, intelligence, and a potent combination of charm and relentless determination. By his early 40s, he had constructed a formidable real estate empire, his name becoming synonymous with success, and he was the sort of man that everyone aspired to be associated with. Clara, on the other hand, came from a privileged background. The daughter of a renowned author and a classical pianist, she was raised in an environment that valued culture and refinement. Clara had pursued her passion for art history in college, dreaming of one day curating exhibitions in a prestigious museum. However, she put her aspirations on hold when her then-boyfriend expressed his desire for them to settle down together. Tragically, he later abandoned her for another woman, leaving Clara heartbroken and robbed of the will to pursue her museum dreams. It was during this tumultuous period that she met Henry, and the two instantly connected, deciding to marry soon after. The early years of their marriage were filled with joy and promise. 2 years into their union, Clara and Henry welcomed a new addition to their family. They were overjoyed, and Clara, in particular, was ecstatic about this new chapter in their lives. Henry, ever the devoted husband and father, began to take more time away from his work to care for his growing family. Their household seemed to embody the very definition of happiness and contentment. Sadly, this bliss was not to last. Tragically, their child, born prematurely, did not survive, and Clara's subsequent efforts to conceive proved unsuccessful. The loss cast a long, dark shadow over their once perfect marriage, and the cracks that began to form would ultimately lead to the devastating events that shook Cedar Grove to its core. As the community grappled with the aftermath of Henry's murder, the once peaceful town was forever changed. The dark underbelly of seemingly perfect lives was laid bare, and the residents of Cedar Grove were forced to confront the unsettling truth that even the most idyllic facades can hide sinister secrets. The Callahan story served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that the line between perfection and tragedy is often perilously thin. Rewind to the beginnings of their union. The paths of Henry and Clara intertwined at a charity auction in 2000. Henry, already triumphant in his career but yearning for personal connections, was instantly enchanted by Clara's sophistication and poise. Clara, formerly a model who had weathered a stormy relationship and heartache, saw in Henry an opportunity to reconstruct her life. He presented her with emotional sustenance and financial security. Their courtship was swift and impassioned, culminating in a magnificent wedding. The celebration was opulent, set in a historic estate adorned with silk draperies, crystal chandeliers, and a garden bursting with myriads of roses. Clara was resplendent in a designer gown, while Henry embodied the image of a distinguished entrepreneur. The initial years of their marriage were marked by sheer bliss. Henry's profession skyrocketed, garnering him affluence and praise, and he ascended to partner status at his firm, celebrated for his achievements. Clara discovered solace in establishing a boutique, her haven where she could express her creativity and zeal for fashion. The boutique prospered, becoming a favorite among the town's elite and instilling Clara with a sense of purpose. As time wore on, their flawless life began to tarnish. Henry's vocation demanded more of his time, with prolonged evenings at the office and incessant business travels. The once inseparable duo started to drift apart. Clara, feeling increasingly secluded, immersed herself in her boutique. She broadened her enterprise, organized events, and sought to fill the void with her labor. The loss of their child marked a pivotal moment. It was an unspoken wound that both harbored deeply. The nursery they had prepared remained vacant, a perpetual reminder of their sorrow. The inability to conceive again exacerbated the strain. Clara's aspirations of a family dissipated, supplanted by emptiness. She attended fertility treatments alone, silently enduring the emotional and physical tribulations. Henry, though sympathetic, buried himself in work, unable to confront their shared anguish. Their residence, once echoing with laughter and warmth, grew cold and quiet. Clara would spend hours in the nursery, enveloped by the unrealized promise of motherhood. Henry, when present, withdrew into his study, submerging himself in work to evade the insufferable reality. Their dialogues grew brief, devoid of intimacy. Clara's boutique morphed into a sanctuary from the emptiness of her home. She spent extended hours there, finding fleeting solace in the bustle and creative endeavors. Yet each evening, she returned to a house that felt increasingly alien. The chasm between them was tangible, a divide neither knew how to traverse. Their mutual grief and unvoiced fears festered, breeding tension in their lives. By the summer of 2015, the Callahans' union had diminished to a mere facade. To the outside world, they remained the golden couple. Henry stood on the precipice of securing a monumental deal that would cement his industry status. Clara's boutique was thriving, her designs amassing a devoted following. Behind closed doors, however, they were merely cohabitants, akin to strangers. Conversations were scarce, revolving around schedules and social engagements. Physical intimacy had waned, each touch serving as a reminder of their unuttered grief and unsatisfied expectations. Both Henry and Clara found it more convenient to uphold the illusion of happiness than to address the abyss that had expanded between them. Little did they know, this delicate equilibrium was on the brink of disruption, a shift that would impact not only their lives, but also the entire community of Cedar Grove. The Parkers had settled into the residence adjacent to the Callahans in early 2011, seeking a new beginning. Simon, an esteemed literature professor, had accepted a position at a nearby university, enticed by the allure of a quieter life away from the city's bustle. Emily, an accomplished landscape architect, welcomed the move as a chance to bring her artistic vision to new endeavors. Their son Jerry, a college junior studying environmental science, was spending the summer at home, engaged in a local conservation project. The Parkers swiftly earned a reputation for their warmth and intellect, seamlessly integrating into the relaxed atmosphere of Cedar Grove. Simon's captivating lectures at the university garnered him admiration, while Emily's breathtaking garden designs became the neighborhood's highlight. Emily, initially hesitant about the relocation, found herself captivated by the serenity and natural beauty of their new home. It was during a neighborhood gathering in late June that Jerry Parker first saw Clara Callahan in a different light. The Callahans were hosting the event, and Henry, as usual, held court, discussing his latest business exploits. Clara, feeling out of place amidst the crowd, had retreated to the patio for some fresh air. Jerry, seeking a respite from socializing, happened to step outside at the same moment. Their gazes locked, and Jerry offered Clara a tentative smile. They struck up a conversation about gardening, a topic Clara had recently embraced to fill her solitary days. Jerry, with his expertise in environmental science, shared insights and suggestions, and a connection began to blossom. Over the subsequent weeks, Clara and Jerry discovered reasons to spend time together. Clara invited Jerry to assist with her garden, and Jerry welcomed the opportunity to apply his studies practically. As one might expect, their first kiss transpired on a rainy afternoon in early July. Jerry had come over to discuss a new garden layout, and as they worked, a sudden downpour drove them to seek refuge in the Callahan sunroom. As they stood by the window, watching the rain, an unspoken tension filled the air. Clara, feeling a connection she hadn't experienced in years, leaned in and kissed Jerry. For Jerry, the kiss was a revelation, a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. Despite the intricacy of their emotions, they found themselves inexorably drawn together. Their encounters grew more frequent and intense. They were cautious, mindful of the risks. Their meetings were clandestine, often taking place in Clara's boutique or secluded spots around town. Yet as the summer wore on, maintaining their secret became increasingly challenging. They narrowly avoided detection on several occasions. Close calls and near discoveries heightened their anxiety, but the intensity of their emotions kept them returning to each other. Clara felt a renewed sense of joy and passion, something utterly distinct from her life with Henry. Jerry, enchanted by Clara's elegance and the thrill of their forbidden relationship, found himself developing genuine feelings, falling deeper and deeper for the older married woman. August 10th, 2015 dawned as another scorching summer day in Cedar Grove. For Henry Callahan, this day was critical. A vital meeting loomed, one that could solidify his most significant deal to date. Departing early, he left Clara lost in thought, still tucked in bed. Knowing Henry would be absent all day, Clara sent a text to Jerry inviting him over. Jerry, increasingly uneasy with his feelings for Clara, recognized that this love, albeit genuine, was irrational. He resolved to end the affair and saw the message as a chance to confront his emotions. He responded, agreeing to meet. The day crept by for both of them. Clara went through the motions at her boutique, preoccupied and anxious. Jerry, engaged in his conservation project, struggled to concentrate. At 1:30 p.m., Jerry approached the Callahan residence, his heart racing. Clara greeted him with a nervous smile, guiding him to the sunroom where their first kiss had occurred. Jerry started to speak, but Clara, misreading his hesitation, silenced him with a kiss. Despite their reservations, they succumbed to the moment, their longing for each other eclipsing their doubts. Across town, Henry Callahan sat in his office, his exasperation growing. The figures for his deal weren't adding up, and he braced himself for a long night of revisions and negotiations. Henry made an impulsive decision. He would return home, regroup, and gather his thoughts before heading back to the office to wrap up before dinner. At 2:15 p.m., his car pulled into the driveway of their lakeside home in Crestwood. Noticing Jerry Parker's rustic truck parked nearby, he dismissed it, assuming Jerry was assisting Clara with some chores. As he unlocked the front door, the house was silent, yet something felt amiss. A half-empty glass of orange juice sat on the kitchen counter, striking him as odd since Clara disliked orange juice. Then he heard it, a muffled sound emanating from upstairs. Brow furrowed, he ascended the stairs. the noise intensifying as he neared the master bedroom. What he witnessed upon opening the door would be indelibly etched into his memory. His wife, the woman he had cherished for 15 years, was in their bed with Jerry Parker, the 21-year-old neighbor's son whom he had least suspected of being close to her. Henry's astonishment morphed into fury. Without a moment's thought, he lunged forward, bellowing and demanding to know what they were doing. Jerry panicked, scrambled off the bed, toppling the nightstand in his haste. Clara shrieked, attempting to cover herself with the sheets. Driven by wrath, Henry seized Jerry by the collar, hauling him off the bed. Jerry flailed, gasping, pleading that he could explain, but Henry was beyond reason, his fists lashing out. Amidst the chaos, Jerry's hand found the heavy lamp on the bedside table. Propelled by desperation, he swung it wildly. The lamp struck Henry's head with a sickening thud. Henry staggered, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, before crumpling to the floor. An eerie silence descended upon the room. Clara's scream shattered the quiet as she struggled to cover herself and comprehend what had just transpired. Blood pooled swiftly around Henry's motionless form. Jerry dropped the lamp, his hands trembling, horror and disbelief etched on his face. He looked at Clara, his voice barely audible. "What have we done?" Clara, her voice quivering yet resolute, insisted they conceal the body. She declared that she couldn't let Jerry go to jail, her eyes wild with fear. Jerry nodded numbly. They hastily dressed, their minds racing with panic and dread. Wrapping Henry's body in a sheet, they struggled under its weight as they carried it downstairs. Each step was filled with anguish and remorse. Finally, they managed to hoist Henry's body into the bed of Jerry's truck, panting from the exertion. Clara drove Henry's car to a nearby parking lot, leaving it there to create the illusion that he had gone out. She then returned home where she and Jerry began the grim task of cleaning up the blood. Every wipe of the cloth felt like a betrayal, the scent of bleach intermingling with their guilt. The master bedroom, once a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. For 2 days, Clara and Jerry steered clear of each other, the weight of their secret bearing down on them. Clara fielded calls from Henry's office, informing his colleagues that he was away on a business trip. But when Henry failed to appear for a crucial meeting, his office dispatched someone to the house to check on him. The HR manager stood at the door, suspicion clouding his eyes as he inquired why she hadn't filed a missing person report. Clara, her heart pounding, tried to remain composed, lying that she thought he was on a business trip to deflect suspicion. She contacted the police immediately. The police swiftly arrived, their presence amplifying the tension. They commenced their investigation, interrogating Clara, who grappled to preserve her composure. Meanwhile, Jerry had returned to school, consumed by guilt and dread. He had severed communication with Clara, and they had agreed to cease contact until the storm subsided. Detective Laura Mitchell was assigned to the case, a veteran investigator with a keen mind. She instantly sensed something amiss. Her initial questions were routine, but she quickly probed deeper. Clara's narrative was riddled with inconsistencies, and her anxiety was evident. Mitchell's discerning gaze missed nothing, registering every quaver in Clara's voice and every discrepancy in her story. The case grew more intricate, casting lengthening shadows of suspicion over Cedar Grove. Detective Laura Mitchell initiated her interrogation, meticulously studying Clara's every gesture. She inquired about the last time Clara saw her husband. Clara, attempting to sound persuasive, asserted that he had departed for a business trip on Monday morning. When pressed for specifics about the trip, Clara wavered, stating that he often kept his destinations vague due to the nature of his work. Mitchell nodded, taking notes, and requested access to Henry's phone records and emails. Clara, feeling cornered, consented. Over the ensuing days, the investigation escalated. Mitchell's team found no indication of a business trip in Henry's phone and email records. Neighbors reported seeing Jerry's truck at the Callahan residence the day Henry vanished, prompting Mitchell to revisit Clara. When confronted about Jerry's truck, Clara falsely claimed he was assisting with yard work. Mitchell, dubious, noted the improbability of yard work during the scorching heat of a July afternoon, but temporarily let it pass, turning her attention to Jerry Parker. Jerry, haunted by the memory of Henry's lifeless form, was approached by Mitchell at his school. When questioned about his presence at the Callahan house, Jerry echoed Clara's lie about yard work, his voice trembling. Mitchell, perceiving his fear, disbelieved him. She advised that honesty would serve him better, but Jerry steadfastly maintained his innocence. Mitchell knew she needed more evidence. She summoned forensic teams to the Callahan house, where they uncovered traces of blood that had been hastily cleaned. Clara's story began to disintegrate further. Mitchell noted inconsistencies in Clara's timeline and her escalating anxiety. Despite Clara's attempts to uphold the facade, the pressure intensified. The pivotal moment arrived courtesy of an anonymous informant who had frequently observed Clara and Jerry together, their interactions suspiciously affectionate. Mitchell delved deeper into their relationship, unearthing secret emails and text messages that laid bare the extent of their affair and their frantic efforts to conceal it. Confronted with the evidence, Clara's composed exterior began to fracture. When pressed to explain her communications with Jerry, she attempted to dismiss their relationship as a mere friendship, but Mitchell was unyielding. The detective underscored that friends do not exchange such messages and highlighted the blood traces discovered in the house. Clara held firm, asserting that Henry had departed for a business trip. Mitchell refocused her attention on Jerry, who had been evading contact with Clara. She arranged for Jerry to be brought in for further interrogation. Feeling the heat, Jerry opted to hire a lawyer. During the interrogation, Mitchell methodically presented the evidence, chipping away at Jerry's defenses. She mentioned the blood found in the house and the absence of any business trip, demanding the truth. Jerry's silence, advised by his lawyer, was telling. Forensic experts confirmed the blood evidence belonged to Henry. With mounting evidence, Mitchell secured a search warrant for Jerry's truck, where they discovered fibers matching the sheets from the Callahan house and additional blood traces. Henry's body was found in a nearby parking lot, hastily concealed. Armed with irrefutable evidence, Mitchell swiftly moved to arrest Clara and Jerry. Clara was taken into custody, her face a picture of resignation, while Jerry was arrested, his fate sealed by the overwhelming proof of their crime. The community of Cedar Grove reeled from the scandal. The once idyllic facade was forever shattered as the trial unfolded. More secrets surfaced. Henry's colleagues testified about his escalating stress and frequent arguments with Clara. Neighbors recounted the tension they had sensed in the Callahan household. The jury grappled with a complex web of motivations and actions, each thread leading to the tragic denouement. Clara took the stand, her composure crumbling under the weight of her guilt. She confessed to the affair, but maintained she never intended for Henry to die. She recounted the moments leading up to Henry's death, describing how Jerry, in a state of panic, had grabbed the lamp. Jerry, barely holding back tears, narrated the fateful day with a mix of remorse and sorrow. He detailed the confrontation with Henry, the struggle, and the moment he struck Henry in a blind panic. Jerry's parents sat in the courtroom, their faces etched with grief and disbelief. They listened as their son recounted how he had become entwined in Clara's life and how his actions had resulted in Henry's death. The sorrow on their faces was palpable, a stark contrast to the stoic facade Jerry strove to maintain. Mitchell's testimony proved pivotal. She laid out the investigation, the discrepancies in Clara and Jerry's accounts, and the forensic evidence that ultimately led to their arrest. She described the discovery of Henry's body, the fibers in Jerry's truck, and the blood traces in the Callahan residence. Her systematic presentation painted a vivid picture of culpability. The courtroom was filled with tension as the jury deliberated for days, the gravity of their decision palpable. The silence in the chamber was nearly unbearable. When the jury finally returned with a verdict, the foreman declared, "Jerry Parker, we find you guilty of second-degree murder. Clara Callahan, we find you guilty of being an accessory to murder." Clara received a 15-year prison sentence, while Jerry was sentenced to 25 years. The community of Cedar Grove was left to grapple with the aftermath, forever altered by the events that had transpired. Detective Mitchell, haunted by the case, couldn't help but ponder the alternate paths that might have been taken. The Callahans and Parkers had been ordinary individuals, their lives entwined in unforeseen ways. The tragedy that befell them served as a stark reminder of the fragility of normalcy's veneer. In the hushed wake of the trial, Cedar Grove strove to reclaim its tranquil existence. The specter of the Callahan case lingered, a persistent reminder that even the most serene communities can conceal dark secrets. The Parker family, devastated by the revelations and the loss of their son to the penal system, withdrew from public life, their anguish a testament to the far-reaching repercussions of the tragic liaison. The Callahan house, once a symbol of prosperity and harmony, stood vacant, a mute witness to the life that had once flourished within its walls.